Hello and welcome back to Random Librarian here on YouTube. So this is going to be my August wrap-up video, but I'm doing it in multiple parts this month because as I finish books, I'm going to be posting them on Bookstagram for sale for the most part, with certain exceptions. So today is August 12th, so I'm going to share with you the 8 books that I have read already in the month of August, because I am very much trying to read everything off of my physical TBR. So, bye everyone! So this is kind of like a little bit less than the first half of August, but yeah, right? Cool. Let's go with that. So, first one is a series that I'm not really going to talk about, but I'm reading it because I have them and they're in physical hardcover copies, which is 2 books by Rainbow Rowell, which she's got some points against her in the authors we don't like category. But the next one, a book that I absolutely adored, was A Song of Wraiths and Ruin. So this I bought as it came out last year, and I don't normally buy things in hardcover, but then because it was in a hardcover, I didn't read it for a full year, which is not the best way to do this because this book deserves to be read immediately by anyone who gets their hands on it. So this book follows 2 characters and 2 voices, so we get to see both of their perspectives. So Malik and Karina. And I don't actually want to say too much because that is the one thing that I had a little bit of a with for this book, because on the flap it gives you like the whole rundown of the story, but the flap, the like story doesn't start until like 150 pages in. So like I was very confused that one of the characters was alive because they don't seem to be on the flap, if that makes sense. Hope it does. It takes place in a kingdom where Karina is the crown princess, almost by default, because her father and sister were killed in a fire when she was much younger. She doesn't remember much of what happened. So she and her mother don't get along super well. Karina doesn't really want to be the princess. She goes out into the city to play music and like just to kind of shrug off the responsibility for a little bit. And then Malik and his sisters are arriving in Karina's city as refugees, essentially. And they're trying to move somewhere and pretend that they're of a different background in order to make money and send it back to their family in a place that has been colonized by Karina's people. And it goes from there. There are twists, there's turns, there's surprising magic that people think doesn't exist anymore. There are surprising spirits that you don't really know who they are or like how they fit into the story until later, and like you think you might know but then you don't. I thoroughly recommend this one, and I recommend that you go in without really reading the blurb because I wish I had. But it's also stunning. And book 2 is on NetGalley right now, so it's coming out soon. Yeah. I read Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, which is the second book after From Blood and Ash. I like this more than From Blood and Ash because there's actually a plot, but I just don't think that Jennifer L. Almond-Trout is really for me. It doesn't feel like she plotted her series out as well as she could have, and it doesn't feel like she has an editor. So while I'm reading it, I'm just like, there's like certain times where she writes something and it's like just wrong grammatically, and I read it like 3 times to make sure that I'm understanding what she means. And then so the not plotting it out correctly thing, in the first book, Hawk is revealed to be Castile, and Poppy feels very lied to, and she's like, none of it was real, like even his name wasn't real. And then in this book, in order to like lessen the blow a little bit, the author decides that Hawk is actually a nickname based off of his middle name, and it's a dumb middle name. So, yeah, I don't know. The ending is like really good, and I wasn't expecting that. And so like there's plot, there is action, there's like the start of a war essentially, what feels like is coming in the third book. I'm gonna read book 3 because I bought it and I have it, and I want to sell it on Instagram, but I don't think I'm gonna read past that. I think the reason that I thought I would start with JLA's series, with this series from her, to see if I liked her writing and her storytelling, was because I thought it was a trilogy, and now it's not a trilogy. So, anyways, those are my thoughts there. So helpful. I also read We Hunt the Flame by Hafsa Faisal. This was stunning. Oh my goodness. So Zafira is the huntress, but her caliphate and like the people that she hunts for think that she's a man because the person ruling her area is very anti-woman and she doesn't want to be forced into marriage. So she gets approached by a witch who claims that the ruler wants to send her into the magical forest and past the magical forest that she's been hunting in and send her to the place of stories, essentially, and ask her to bring magic back. And then there's also a competing storyline that weaves together with Zafira's from the prince, who's also an assassin, who's got some... They both have some serious trauma around their families, and I loved all of the characters in here. There are certain characters that I didn't feel as connected to, and then they were killed, so I don't know. I feel like you might want... I was happy not to have my heart ripped out and stomped on, but I was also like a little annoyed that my heart wasn't ripped out and stomped on. So I want to know what happens in book 2, because this feels like it's setting up a lot of things that are going to happen later on. But if you haven't read this already, do. I know I'm very behind the curve here in picking it up this late. I also read book 3 of the Old Kingdom series by Garth Nix. I have book 4 and Clariel, which is the prequel, and I'm hoping to read both of those this month and then sell these gorgeous special editions, UK editions, I think, on Bookstagram. I still like book 2 the best of the 3s that I've read thus far, but anything with Clariel in it is like I'm gonna love it. Magical Librarian, Talking Dog is a Best Friend. The stakes were really high in this one because it picks up where Lyriel's book, which is book 2, left off, and it feels like an extension of that one. But because none of it takes place in the magical library, I like this one a little bit less. But it also gives me more of a sense of like the world and what's happening and the different characters involved. So every time I read another book in this series, I feel like I actually get a better sense of what the magic system is. It's interesting in book 1 in Sabriel because readers basically get dropped into the Old Kingdom the same way someone from Ancelstier would, because Ancelstier basically doesn't have magic and some of them don't think that the Old Kingdom exists. But as you kind of get to know the quirks of the magic systems and like understand the different powers at play, it's so smart. I love the way this world building is handled, and apparently so does everyone else, because it has quotes from Philip Pullman, Lee Bardugo, and Sarah J. Maas on these editions. So if you like me, you hadn't heard of these before, you should definitely pick them up if you enjoy the works of those authors. Oh, this one is also kind of a miss for me, but I read Serpent and Dove. I won this in a giveaway. It's very pretty. I thought I would enjoy it because it is French-based witches and witch hunters sounds like my kind of thing, but if you've watched With Cindy's video about it, previously Read With Cindy, then I feel mainly what she felt about this book. The premise is weird in the first place because people think that she's being abused and then back off when he says that they're married. It's like, oh no, that's not great. And the writing was a little bit weird for me too. There's one quote where she says, like, despite my not inconsiderable height, and that, I took a picture of it because it stuck with me because that's wrong. If you're saying your height is considerable, you're saying you're tall. So if you're not inconsiderable, you're saying you're tall, but in this, like, writing of it, she means to say I am short compared to this person. So it's not considerable or inconsiderable. It's not inconsiderable. And I know that's very nitpicky, but that's one example of, like, the reason I didn't vibe with her writing. And it is kind of weird of me to be saying this because I'm very verbose when it comes to writing, like even down to like emails. I use too many words, and I know this about myself, but I felt like Shelby Mahurin used too many words, and also it muddled what she was trying to say as she was doing so. But I'm probably not going to continue with this series, but I can see why people do enjoy it. It's definitely the enemies to lovers, like, fantasy. There's some twists and turns in here. There are some things I didn't see coming. I think the last, like, quarter of the book was actually, like, good pacing wise and introducing other, like, magic. I'm also a little confused about the magic system because when Lou does magic and when Coco does magic, they both actually, like, have to give up something. It has to be something of equal weight for Lou, and for Coco it involves using her blood and, like, ingredients that go along with it that affect what she's trying to do on the external world. But when we go to the castle and we meet Lou's mom and other witches, it seems like they are just willy-nilly using magic and there's no consequences for them. And I know that she says in earlier ones, like, witches get changed, and, like, the ones who were using people in the street, like using them as puppets, have, like, lost certain parts of themselves, but, like, it wasn't clear enough to me that there were consequences for other people's magics. It just felt like other people were allowed to be stronger than Lou because it pushed the plot forward. So, like I said, this wasn't for me, but I also completely understand why it is for other people, and I hope that someone will want it. My copy does have one ripped page, but that's fine. Then I read The Bone Shard Daughter as part of my commute mainly, and this, despite being like a chunky read, was such a quick, fun read. Just, like, I have been really loving unique magic systems lately, which is partly why I've been so into the Old Kingdom series, because I've never seen, like, bells used as a magic system, and it's definitely why I'm into The Bone Shard Daughter, because the magic in this works through, like, constructs, so it's half, like, creation and the ability to craft the world around you, but it also, the magic itself is, like, they have these yearly gatherings where they take a shard of bone from the Empire's subjects' skulls, and then the Emperor and his daughter and his ward can engrave those bones in order to bestow life and, like, rules and, like, how the construct should behave onto a previously lifeless form, which is fascinating. And then there's other kinds of magic that get introduced later in the book that I was just like, oh, I need to know what happens. But I am left with so many more questions than answers at the end of this book, because the world building was, like, so intricate. The magic systems were, like, the groundwork is there. There was a lot of plot going on. There's, like, 4 different plots that we're following and 4 different, like, voices that we're reading through. And it's setting it up for, like, an incredible series. But we're, like, just stopped in the middle of the story, it feels like. So if you want it to be like wrapped up, that doesn't really happen in book one, but I'm definitely going to keep reading the rest of the series because I am dying to know where Andrea Stewart takes this, especially because like their writing is just so good and their ideas are conveyed so well that something that normally bugs me, which is half of the book written from first person and half of it written from third person, doesn't bother me at all in this book. Like normally I absolutely hate that. I'm like, pick one and stick to it, but it's done so well here. It's done so well here. So I definitely recommend picking this one up. Maybe wait until book 2 is ready, because I want to pick up book 2 right now and I don't have it. So if you want to avoid that fate, maybe wait a little bit, but also recommend reading it. And then I'm gonna finish this one today. I have 100 pages left of this gorgeous edition of Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which is a classic that I can't believe no one told me to read before now. Like, excuse me, guys, why are you keeping the good stuff away from me? It's not kind. So I bought this very fancy folio edition because it's one of my best friends from grad school. It's her like favorite book. So I bought her one and I was like, I'm gonna buy me one. So I bought one too. There are gorgeous illustrations. So like beyond just the cover, which is stunning, there are full page color illustrations and smaller black and white inserts into the text. So I've just gotten to like the big turning point in this novel, which I can't believe it took this long to get there, but like I'm not mad at it. This book is like genre bending, I would say. It's definitely got like the gothic feel, it's got like the murder mystery feel, it's got even some of the just like romances of the time kind of feel, like when they're in, where are they? Italy? France at the beginning? So yeah, I mean, it's just, there's a lot going on here and I am just so in love with it. So I'm very glad that we'll have this beautiful edition that my parents can read after I get rid of all these books. This is one that I'm probably not going to sell just because it's like fancy and pretty and good to keep. But the rest of them I'm going to put on my Bookstagram, some of them immediately and some of them after I finish the series that they are part of. So for the rest of the month, let's see, I've got a couple other series and standalones that I might try to finish. I have some holds coming in from Libby because, like I said, this month I have been focusing on books that I have the audiobooks for. So that's the plan currently. Well, I will see you guys for part 2 in like 2 seconds for you and at the end of the month for me. Bye! Hello, welcome back for part 2 of what I read in August. I am so glad I did this in 2 parts because things have been changing around here and at least part 1 has a nice backdrop. Part 2 has moving boxes literally everywhere because I officially gave my notice and I will be moving to France at the end of September / beginning of October. So exciting. But as a result, I'm reading so much so that hopefully I can just unhaul a bunch of stuff, either like give it to friends, maybe sell it for like shipping price on Bookstagram or Book Talk, or just donate to little free libraries and local secondhand bookshops. Who knows? But there's options for all. Okay, so more of what I've read this month. Let's just dive in. I finally read Hood Feminism, which is just absolutely incredible. Notes from the Woman That a Movement Forgot. So this covers a lot of different things that like mainstream feminism doesn't talk about as feminist issues, and it gets pretty personal as well. Like there are parts of this where Maggie Kendall talks about her own experiences with relationships and like other parts of her life. So I definitely thoroughly recommend this. It is a bit of a like shift in terms of thinking about feminism and what it means and what it can mean. So Loved this so much. The audio was also absolutely great. These are completely out of order. If you want to know what order I read them in, you can check out Goodreads or the Story Graph. I also read, or finally finished, How to Stop Time by Matt Haig. This I would recommend to people who enjoyed Addie LaRue, or for those who read Addie LaRue and didn't think that it like gave as much as it could have, or as much as like everyone who was talking about it and loving it thought it did. So it didn't hit the mark for me is what I'm trying to say. This one is a little bit more so in that there's way more plot, and the author goes places that aren't just like New York City and like Paris or Western Europe. And essentially, instead of like time travel, there's a group of people who stop aging at like puberty, I guess, and then age extremely slowly beyond that point. So Tom is our main character here, and he was born in Elizabethan times, I guess. Elizabethan England to Jazz Age Paris, from New York to the South Seas. Tom has seen it all. And he joins a like community, or like they find him, of people who are all aging the same way, and they move him every like 7 years so that people stop, like, don't question why he doesn't age. And it jumps back and forth between his time, like his what should have been his like his only timeline, so growing up, getting accused of witchcraft, all that crazy stuff, because that was happening a lot more frequently then, and falling in love with someone that ages normally and how that caused problems for his family. And also you get like the modern perspective where he's looking for his daughter because she has the same aging condition, and he hasn't seen her since she was a child, like a small child. I really enjoyed it. I did think that there was like this last 100 pages like twist to the story that I was like, you really should have given that more time to be explored, but I still liked it more than Addie LaRue. I started this, I think it's a duology from Laini Taylor. This is my first Laini Taylor read. I have been stumbling across a lot of books with magical librarians, and I'm very excited about that. So reading this, and Laszlo is a librarian who focuses on magic, and I thought it was really fun and interesting. It's really not like anything that I've read before. And then there's, I mean, I'm sure people, most of you on here, if you've been on BookTube for a while, have read something by Laini Taylor, but I didn't know what to expect really, and it was just even much more like intricate than I was expecting. Like, Laszlo grows up in an orphanage far away from this nameless city that everyone else calls Weep, but it had a name before that, and it was kind of cursed to be forgotten, except by this name that isn't accurate. And Laszlo was like playing pretend that he was protecting that nameless city as a child, when the curse like snapped into effect and he lost the name. Like, it just flew out of his head. And ever since then, he's been trying to figure out where the city is, how to get there, how to help it, how to like find magic in a world that he thought was magicless before that moment in time. And he kind of accidentally becomes a librarian. He's got this rivalry with this golden godson who's the godchild of the queen. There's a lot of like alchemy going on, and then they go to the city in order to find a way to break their curse, but that's even more complicated than even what I've just been saying so far, because they had gods, and then there's this giant statue that's like floating above the city. Oh my gosh, I really enjoyed it. I have book 2 ready to go. I have the audiobook on my phone, so that is something that I'm definitely going to read for September, and because I still have so many questions at the end of this. Strange the Dreamer. Read that. Liked it a lot. I found this when I moved again and realized that I hadn't finished the last like 100 pages of it somehow. I love Neil Gaiman. What I've read of Terry Pratchett's I've really enjoyed as well. So this was a blast to finish. I mean, now I guess I can finally watch the TV show. Another one that I finally read is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. This is the first book of Becky Chambers that I've ever read, and it made me think of Firefly in like the best way possible. I love a good found family. Firefly was my favorite TV show for like years. When it was on Netflix, I watched it so frequently, and getting up to space in like a kind of rust buckety ship and going on like a mission and all that kind of fun stuff. It just reminded me of my favorite parts of Firefly, but with even like wilder crewmates and like actual aliens involved instead of just humans going into space. It was like a human alien hybrid crew, and I'm really excited to keep reading the rest of the series. I thought this was a standalone, and now I have been made aware that that is not the case. So I think it is a trilogy. There are at least 3 books. So that is to come. And then because I am always on a bit of a sci-fi and fantasy kick, I read 2 books by N.K. Jemisin. I finally read How Long Till Black Future Month, and I didn't think I was a short story person, but these are incredible. Oh my goodness. It's really interesting. Some of the stories you can see like the roots or the foundation for some of her full-length novels. And then there are others that I hope get turned into full-length novels at some point or get more fleshed out. But I actually never felt like I needed more from what was given within these pages. Like each one is just perfectly self-possessed and amazingly written, of course, and somehow even within just like the length of the short story, the characters are fully fleshed out. And read this if you haven't. It's incredible. Then I picked up the first book in the Inheritance trilogy, which is The 100,000 Kingdoms. This is so different from the Broken Earth trilogy, which is the first series I read from Jemisin. So I was just firstly blown away by the fact that she writes within the same, you know, genre, but all of her work that I've read now, including all the different stories in How Long Till Black Future Month, are so unique, and I'm in awe, honestly. So this one involves gods instead of like powered human, or I don't know how to explain really the Broken Earth trilogy. It's so like unique on its own. It's like people who have the ability to interact with the earth and like rocks, and also kind of do magic as a byproduct of that. And this involves gods who have somehow been entrapped by the ruling family of this kingdom. And it goes into like the forming of the earth and how these 3 like big gods came to be. And it also talks about like the pantheon of gods that they've created or that they have brought into being. And yeah, I am so intrigued to see where it goes from here, because it left off on a really interesting point. And it also said, so we passed beyond the universe and now there is nothing more to tell, ... of this tale anyhow. So I'm like, are we gonna have the same characters in the next one? Are we gonna be in the same place? Like, I'm just very intrigued to see what happens. And I enjoyed the way that this is told as well, because it is being told from the perspective of the main character at the end of the novel, retelling all of it. But there's moments where instead of like telling the story she has a moment where she's like speaking to a different person that we don't know, and she has this like dual nature. It's masterful. Just read it. Ooh, another short story collection that I read and absolutely loved was Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. Yeah, another just like absolute titan of a writer, I think. Anything that she writes, I will want to read. The one that sticks out the most is, of course, with the green ribbon, because not only is that one of those like creepypasta stories that you hear when you're a kid, it's on the cover, and these are pretty dark. There's a lot of very different storytelling. So like the one with the green ribbon is pretty like straightforward, pulls from a story that most American readers, I think at least, would know. And then there's one that I just like did not really know what to do with, but was listening to while I was painting, and it was based off of, at least at the start, Law and Order, the Special Victims Unit, SVU. And yeah, a phantasmagoric police procedural full of doppelgangers, ghosts, and girls with bells for eyes. So this really just like goes wherever Carmen Maria Machado wants it to go, and is a very unique reading experience. After that, the other book I was talking about that was kind of darker than I was expecting was The Hazelwood. So this is the story of Alice, whose grandmother is a like cult famous writer of fairy tales, and Alice and her mom have been on the run basically since Alice can remember. So every time they move somewhere, they stay there until the bad luck catches them, and then they move again and start over completely somewhere else. And then when they're living in New York, Alice's mother goes missing, and Alice thinks that it's like the fans of her grandmother who has taken her, and it's the hinterland. And she teams up with Ellery Finch, who's one of her classmates and also a super fan of her grandmother, to go and figure out what to do next. And then I also, the audiobook came with a novella from Ellery Finch's perspective. So I read that right afterwards because it was just on the same audio track. And this was so good. The tales were extremely creepy, the ones that we got included, and the story was just really well written, and I really enjoyed the like twist on like a dark fairy tale that the Hazelwood offers. But I think I also have Melissa Albert's next book on hold. I think it's Tales from the Hinterland, which is like a full collection of the stories that would have been included if the book was actually published by Alice's grandmother. So I'm like very much sucked into the world of this at this point. I wanna know more. Continuing on the dark vibe, picked up the first of this trilogy, A Great and Terrible Beauty by Libba Bray. This is about Gemma Doyle. This was published in 2003. I had to look it up because it's a little outdated. So it's published in 2003, and it's about Victorian England. So Gemma grew up in India for the most part, and after her mom is attacked and also commits suicide, gets sent to a finishing school that is like the perfect Gothic setting. It's like an old mansion in the middle of the woods, and part of it has been closed off because there were girls who died in a fire there. She makes friends with some kind of awful people. It also kind of feels like if The Craft, the movie from like the 90s, were set in Victorian England with like corsets and stuff, because like even what they're talking about, like their greatest wish, and like that's the first thing they're asking of the magic, and Gemma says to know herself. One of her friends asks for beauty, and the other asks for power, and the fourth of them asks for true love. So even that like felt very like Okay, I know where this is going. I'm not sure I'm going to be continuing with the series because, like I said, it's very outdated, especially when it comes to talking about the non-white characters. Like, they're seen kind of as, like, dangerous, and also aren't really given a say in the story beyond being love interests. I don't know. I had some issues with that, especially because they're used for like mysticism and to kind of repel the plot and also to get murdered at some point. But yeah, just got some issues about that. So I can see why people enjoyed it, and like I read it on the recommendation of a friend. I bought all three secondhand on the recommendation of a friend and who read it when we were in high school. I just think that if Luba Bray wrote it today, she might make some different decisions. Continuing on the kind of dark path, we have A Gathering of Shadows, which is book 2 of the Darker Shade of Magic series. I don't really know what the series is called, but it's book 2 of that series by V.E. Schwab. And this is very fun because who doesn't love like a magical competition, you know, like pitting mages against each other, almost like a Pokemon battle. I don't know, it was really fun. And this also has, it takes what was started in book 1 and really like twists it and takes it places that I wasn't expecting it to go. And we get to see Delilah Bard on a pirate ship. We get to see her being a thief, which is always very fun. Like, more heist stuff, please. There's more going on between the different Londons. And so I am very interested to see how this gets wrapped up in book 3, because book 3 is chunky. It is huge. I read this last book in the Old Kingdom series by Garth Nix, Golden Hand. I think this is now tied for my favorite in the series with Lyriel, because this is more of a like team up kind of like the fight against the big bad, and we get the introduction of Farron and the expansion of the world beyond just the Old Kingdom and Celestier. So this is the map that we've had in the previous novels, and then Farron, this map like ends here essentially, and Farron is from up here, and we have this introduction of a whole new type of people who are nomadic and have different interactions with magic. And yeah, Farron is just really, I really enjoyed her as a character, and I thought that they did a great job both introducing her and building upon the characters that we already know and love. So I'm also currently reading Clariel, which is the prequel, and that is really interesting right now because it's the story of one of the bad guys in the Old Kingdom series, but happens like 600 years before, and kind of how Belisar and how the Old Kingdom was before magic left. So when Clariel comes 600 years in the future, the Old Kingdom is kind of overrun by free magic and sorcerers and the dead. So it's really weird seeing it in Clariel's book because the king has essentially stopped ruling. He doesn't want to be king anymore, and it's covering like the infighting among the elite in Belisar, and Clariel just wants to like, she just wants to go back to her small town and like live in the woods and not have anything to do with magic. And she's related to the Abhorsons but doesn't actually know any of the like charter marks. She doesn't have any interest or hasn't been asked to be an Abhorson in waiting. So it's just a very, very different world than the version of it we see in the Old Kingdom series. Still really enjoying it though. Okay, let's keep going. So far, so Clariel is my 28th book of this month. So I'm definitely getting through stuff, which is good because I need to. So that's good. This is the one book that I read that I didn't have the audio for, and that is Fortune Favors the Dead by Stephen Spotswood. This is the first in a series, Pentecost and Parker. It's a murder mystery kind of. They are private detectives. So it's 1945 New York, and Pentecost is Lillian Pentecost. She is the private detective. She wears suits. She has multiple sclerosis, and she sometimes uses a cane. She is like the one who solves the unsolvable cases. She meets Will while she's pursuing a murderer in a case that very much has like roots, and she hasn't unraveled it yet, even after like 3 years of working with Will. And Will is Willow Jean Parker, so that's Pentecost and Parker. She is a circus trained, lock picking, also snappy dresser, lots of overalls, and bisexual in New York in 1945. So this book has a lot. I am really glad that the publisher sent it to me. I was really grateful to get to read it. It was very fun, and I think I recommend this more for people who like character-driven novels rather than plot-driven novels, because like the mystery does happen and they solve it after some twists and turns, but that's not why I loved it. Like the story wasn't why I was like, oh, I can't wait to read book 2, which is coming out in December. It was really like the two characters and how they exist in New York. And even like the mystery itself ends and they like figure out who did it, but that unveils parts of the conspiracy that they were trying to solve when they met as well. So I don't know, there's more going on here, and I think I need more books in the series to actually know what's going on here. This is a Book Talk Made Me Read It, All the Stars and Teeth by Adeline Grace. It's been a while since I've read a mermaid book, so that was very fun. We have some pirates, we have a stowaway, we have a magical ship, and a a princess with some wonky, kind of terrifying magic. So I did enjoy this, and I'll probably pick up book 2 just because I want to know what happens next. But it wasn't a 5-star enjoyment. I think it was like a high 3, low 4 kind of enjoyment for me, because there's just a lot of heavy-handed like internal monologues about how everything she does for her kingdom. Which, you know, if you're going to be a ruler, that should probably be how you think, but it didn't need to be all that she thought, in my opinion. But there were a lot of like twists though, and I knew some of them because, like I said, I found it off of TikTok, but still fun. I'd love to be on a magic ship. Oof. Alrighty, we have 4 left. I finally read The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead, who is a genius. This book was heavy. Like, there's a lot going on here. I think anything that deals with slavery in the South, especially from the perspective of someone who was enslaved, is just going to sit differently. And there's a lot of violence that's kind of hard to read. Cora is our main character. She has kind of everything stacked against her from the time that she's really young. Her mother escapes and leaves her behind, which means that she kind of grew up as an orphan without someone to look out for her within the plantation where she was raised or born or worked or enslaved. And it's a really interesting way to look at the Underground Railroad, because the railroad in this book exists as a physical railroad that was dug and is run with like steam trains and actual like trains. I highly recommend this. I thought it was just incredible. I wish that we could see, like, I just want her to have a happy ending. And this ending isn't like necessarily happy. There's a lot of trauma there as well, so it's like I know that it's kind of unrealistic to expect a happy ending where like the trauma of what she lived through doesn't affect her. But I still wanted that for her and I didn't get it. So that's the one thing. Doesn't take away from how stellar this book is though. This next book is one that I started reading a full year ago and put aside because the first character who we hear from is just kind of the worst. And that is The Regrets by Amy Bonifants. I mean, I picked it up in part because of the cover. It's just so stunning. And I love the color. Yeah. So this is kind of a love story between a ghost and a manic pixie dream librarian in New York. But it's also kind of a tale about like a toxic relationship. And it's also just kind of like a slice of life of something that is extremely unusual, but handled in a way that is just like, oh, it's just like life in New York. So like this one wasn't really for me, just because, I don't know, like someone on the back described it as a book that reads like Haruki Murakami for the millennial generation. And I think this is like if you want to read Sally Rooney, but like with a little bit of paranormal stuff thrown in. There's a lot of talk about like Rachel, our librarian, her like casual sex life, her friends in New York, how she's looking for the daydream, but in reality with a partner. Yeah, so we've got like a very awful kind of hipster asshole as the main character, Thomas, in the first part. It was just, I don't like. And then we have Rachel, who in like the second part, I also don't like. Then we meet Mark, who's like a normal guy, who's Rachel's ex. And then Rachel and Thomas are both awful to him in different ways, even though Thomas is dead and Mark is just trying to help Rachel move on from I don't know. This wasn't for me. I can understand why it could be for other people, but it's just not for me. Sadly. Because it's so pretty. This is a book that I was expecting to absolutely love because so many people have told me that it's one of their favorite books. This is The Heart's Invisible Furies, and again, I can see why people love it. I definitely really enjoyed this one, so at least it wasn't like The Regrets where I was just kind of like, I have to read it so I can get it off my bookshelves, but I don't like it very much. This one is, it follows Cyril from like the time of his, not quite his conception, but like we follow Cyril throughout his entire life essentially. And it is way funnier than I thought it would be. Like, no one told me it was funny. Like, it opens on the back with saying Cyril Avery is not a real Avery, or at least that's what his adoptive parents tell him. And he never will be. But if he isn't a real Avery, then who is he? And that makes it sound tragic and, like, sad. But that actually gets turned into something that's really funny. I don't know. It's... yeah. I think if I had read it before I had any expectations of it, I would have liked it more. Especially because, like, once I get told, like, oh, you should read this. And that's why I try not to read, like, overhyped books as they're being overhyped. Because I read it much more closely and, like, more critically. So for this, for example, he bumps into his birth mother, like, way too frequently. Like, I don't care how small people think Dublin is or Dublin feels. Like, that... well, it just felt like absolutely no, not possible to me. And then there's also like a lot of times where it's just you can see what's coming because it's the worst possible thing that could happen is what happens for like most of the book, especially considering like the first half. During the first half, Cyril is the absolute worst. Like, he's awful, and he grows up a lot once he leaves Ireland, but it's strange. And it's also presented as if this is completely like a normal everyday life when it's really not. Because he was adopted by like one of Ireland's best-selling novelists after her death. His adoptive father goes to prison multiple times. It's like a very remarkable life, and it's treated as if it's like totally run of the mill. And then it also does that thing with historical fiction that the Matt Haig book that I talked about much earlier also does, which is it tries to tie the character to a lot of like major points. Like his best friend gets kidnapped by the IRA, his boyfriend ends up being like one of the doctors at the forefronts of trying to fight AIDS in New York. He watches 9/11 happen on TV in Ireland when he goes back. So it's just like, there's that instinct to like tie the character to as many like things and people as possible. I don't know. I can't tell if the book is like, it just feels like it's doing too much, but presenting as if it's just like an everyday life. Like, I don't know if I can explain it that well. I just finished this the other day, and I don't know if I've sat with it long enough to fully like have a grasp on my own thoughts even. So I'm just kind of bummed because I was expecting it to be something that I absolutely like was obsessed with. Irish lit is normally like my jam, but this I have some issues with. Not the same kind of issues as like the Gem and Doyle book, but like still some things. And then lastly, of the books that I think I'm gonna read this month, I might sneak in one more, but if I do, I'll include that in next month's wrap up, even if I read it in August. And anyways, so the last book I'm going to talk about today is The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. This is a chunky book. It is, I think, yeah, just over 500 pages. So it's 523 pages. And this is an absolute, like, tour de force of a book. I'm completely and totally in awe of this. It's definitely adult fiction in terms of it is bleak, basically from go. It opens in the middle of like a awful battle. There are people at war, and even when they're not actively fighting, there are people at war within themselves because they're extremely hierarchical. Let me show you. So this is the Omehi people, which is the people that Tao and all of the characters we meet for the most part are part of. So Tao is one of the lessers, and he, at the beginning, his best friend is a noble. I think one of the Inlovu. And then the Ingoyama is the military for the nobles. And Tao is going to be an Ihagu and wants to be an Ihashi. So there's a lot of terms, and there is a glossary for all of them, which is very helpful. But this follows his mother was of a noble class, and after living with Tao and his father for a while, abandoned them to go back to being a noble and marry someone else. Oh my gosh, there's just so much that happens in this book, and there are dragons, and there's a very unique magic system, and they have this way of going into like the like the demon realm, I guess is the best way to explain it. And there's just also a lot of like a training montage because Tao does go and become an initiate, and he does so much just out of this desperate need for revenge. And I think the book that had the most similar vibes for me to this book would be The Poppy War, because in the same way that there's like bloodshed and that kind of like stressful feeling while you're reading it, we get that from Sir Evan Winter. And book 2 is out, and I really want it, but I'm trying to get rid of books because of the whole moving to a different country thing. And yeah, so there's that. Anyways, those are the 28 maybe 29 books that I have read in the month of August. I hope you enjoyed it. If there are any of these books that you would like to have, DM me on Bookstagram at Random Librarians and we can figure out some way to get them sent to you. I'm also probably going to do a video about the Great Unhaul that I'm going to be doing, so that should be fun as well. And yeah, I'll see you guys in another video soon. Thanks for watching!